This is a presentation of the Sports Source Digital Network, presented by Hearthside Bank.
Welcome into the Sports Source Digital Network. I'm John Pennington, joined by Ryan Callahan right there. We're going to talk recruiting. Ryan, of course, the recruiting expert. He exports his information to us, but he's the expert at GoVols247.com. Ryan, I looked around yesterday at the rankings, and what I'm seeing, Tennessee number 35 in the 24/7 Sports National Team Rankings. That's the composite. So my simple question is, what's wrong with the Vols?
Yeah.
How are they 35th?
Yeah, I caution people, the team rankings don't mean a whole lot at this point in the year because it's so much based on how far along you are in building your class, right? They just lost a commitment this week, Tyron Evans, wide receiver from North Carolina. So they go back from 10 commitments down to 9. Some teams are in the teens, 20. Some teams have a lot more commitments than Tennessee does right now, and that's where they are ranked right now is mostly a product of that. Basically, check back in at the end of the summer, and that's where that will tell you really where the progress is. Where are they in, say, mid-August, when a lot of these commitments that are coming in the next several weeks have already happened, and then you truly have seen the fallout of what happened this summer in terms of the official visitors they've hosted this month and the guys who are announcing decisions soon.
My only concern is that Tennessee typically gets off to a hot start, and then the Alabamas and the Georgias and the Ohio States kind of shoot past them late. If this constitutes your hot start, you're going to be lower than usual. That would be my only concern. We've talked about it before, but I'll let you reiterate. That has a little bit to do with the in-state class this year, does it not?
Well, I think it's just sort of overall, yes. I mean, it's a lot of factors, but just overall.
Back that up, because that's the answer you gave me the last time we talked about this.
Well, I mean,
that you've had bigger in-state halls before, and it's allowed you to build your numbers.
Well, it has. So another thing that has changed this spring because they found a few more guys to go after in-state. They're after Zayden Anderson, a cornerback from Greenville. They went after Iverson Garcia, a defensive lineman from Powell, who's now committed to USF.
Okay, here we go.
They've been going after Brody Smith, offensive tackle at Maryville. So they've found some in-state guys to go after, but they're still not committed yet in a lot of cases. So again, a lot of dominoes are just waiting to fall in the coming weeks. It's what we're seeing, I think, basically. I mean, sure, there are a lot of guys still committed across the country, but there are a lot of guys waiting until after they take all their visits, and they're going around and you're sort of shopping on all these visits to see what's out there in terms of revenue sharing offers, NIL, whatever it is. You're seeing your financial opportunities. So a lot of guys don't want to make decisions before they take all of those visits and see what's out there.
Now, you know what this is? This is me running up the red flag, because we can say, well, in the spring it was, well, they don't have the big class, so that's why they're a little behind. Now you're saying, no, there are guys in the area they've gone after, and they're just not getting them.
Not yet. They still may end up getting them, but
in the past they have gotten them at this point. Is what I'm getting at.
Sure.
You aren't. Tennessee is not normally 35th.
Well, I'll give you an example.
At the end of June.
Like I checked out Alabama's class last night. They're 44th right now.
But they always zip by everybody.
That's true.
Tennessee does not.
But this is no longer Nick Saban's Alabama, and
that's true.
they're flipping a quarterback from the state of Nebraska. It's not. So there's some different schools out there. And I think there are a lot of challenges that are out there, and one of them is what I just talked about. Iverson Garcia, a local prospect that Tennessee goes after, commits to USF, and that's a guy Tennessee wanted.
Yeah, and Alex Golish comes back into Knoxville and grabs a kid.
And so what you're seeing there, I think, is
that's not good.
What I think you're seeing there is what we're going to see maybe a lot in the revenue sharing era, and you kind of touched on this.
Yeah.
Schools that didn't have money before now have money, and a guy like that who
he's a B-level recruit for you, but they make him an A-level target. You lose the guy because now
he's worth
USF
more.
Has money that they've never had. Yes,
he's worth more to a program like that. And so, Brody Smith that Tennessee's recruiting from Maryville, he's Lee Smith's son. He's got ties to Tennessee. He's going to NC State this weekend. It's a big priority for NC State. What are they going to offer him? Things like that. Those are tricky recruitments now, where in the past those guys would have ended up at Tennessee in most cases.
All right, let's put a pin in this for a second because it'll lead back into like our third topic. Mm-hmm. Our second topic, 5 stars. I mean, right now you've got 9 commitments. You're ranked 35th in the team composite. Mm-hmm. There's one composite 5-star, and that's still quarterback Faison Brandon. Mm-hmm. You guys have another 5-star on there, and we'll get to that in a second. But let's start with Faison Brandon. How firm is that commitment at this point? I mean, as firm as they can be at this point, because we all know they can change.
Right.
Or do you still think there's some sort of wiggle room? Has anything changed of late?
No, nothing's changed. He's been very solid. Reiterated that again after his official visit to Tennessee. So I think the Vols are in good shape there. Like you said, as good a shape as you could be in with a player in this era. That's where they are with Faison Brandon. Yeah. No signs of anything happening. He says basically he'll get a text from another school every once in a while, but really a lot of that's died down. He said I think a lot of them understand I'm pretty locked in with Tennessee. So not looking around, nothing on the horizon, but that's one of those situations, kind of like we saw last year with David Sanders. All it takes is one team making a run at a guy in the fall, and suddenly if he's taking another visit somewhere, it's real in a hurry. So it's something to keep an eye on, but right now nothing happening with anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, you just keep hearing of these quarterbacks. Diego Pavia this week, I was offered $4 million. Everybody's offered $4 million. If somebody comes in and offers him $6 million, at some point, then you don't know how strong that commitment's going to be. Who's the other 5-star that you guys have put on there?
Yeah, Gabriel Osenda, offensive lineman from Baylor School in Chattanooga, originally from Canada, has only been in the state of Tennessee for about a year, but a guy who really shot up our rankings after going to the All-American Bowl in San Antonio back in January. That's where he announced his commitment to Tennessee. Really impressed our guys there. He's like 330 pounds, a big guy, but moves well as a likely tackle at that size. Kind of reminds you a little bit of Darnell Wright, kind of how he looked coming out of high school. So a bigger guy, might be a right tackle. We'll see where he fits in at Tennessee, but a pretty athletic guy that moves well, and I think depending on your system could be a really good fit. I think what Tennessee does, he could fit in pretty well there as a bigger lineman that can move.
Okay, now let's get back to and we talked about that on a previous episode is what you're referring to, the fact that now that these schools who previously didn't have money, they didn't have the NIL money. Now they've got revenue sharing that's available to them. Mm-hmm. Now they're going to be able to come and pick players off. And we gave all kinds of examples that you would think, well, that would never happen. Okay, it could. That's the point. Well, that brings me to this next point that I was going to ask you anyway. What difference is the house settlement making already? Because we know revenue share. We know how it's supposed to work. We don't know how everything is going to work yet because no one's seen it. Mm-hmm. But what impact have we seen? And it sounds like maybe a little bit right there already. Yeah. Some smaller schools getting in and taking some meat away from the bigger predators.
Yeah, I personally, I don't see how this current setup with the house settlement is very good for Tennessee because I see schools like Georgia and Alabama are benefiting from this because they were not known as big NIL schools. You notice Alabama's been fighting for this stuff as much as anybody. They're eager to see guardrails in place. I think they're liking the fact that this might be, in their minds, a more level playing field for them.
Which is fascinating considering that program that they don't have the deep NIL pockets.
Yeah, I mean, good, but not an advantage over anybody else. So that in a lot of cases they weren't known as the highest bidder. And part of the problem too, when you have a lot of talent on your roster, Georgia runs into this. When you've got established players on your roster that were 5-stars coming out of high school, you can't pay high school signees coming in as much as those guys. You've got to kind of work that out. And so they've got so much talent on the roster, there's just not enough to go around. And so you've got to pick your spots where you're going to invest. So it's a better situation for a Georgia or an Alabama when you've got the same amount of money for everyone. They don't have to worry about an Ohio State or someone like that outspending them. That helps them. And then on the other side, it's programs like USF, NC State, Cincinnati, whoever it's going to be, these mid-tier schools that have been eager for this to come into play, that now they suddenly have money that was not available before. And they've been, in some cases, schools were spending this earlier this year in the transfer portal, promising it because they were anticipating this coming. Now you've got high school recruitments being affected by this, and it's a big deal for some of these schools. So yeah, like you said, it's more opportunities especially for those second tier targets on your board, to maybe have someone, a Wisconsin, prioritizing someone that they're battling a Tennessee or an Ole Miss for. It's going to shake up some recruitments in the SEC, I think, where some of these other Power 4 programs suddenly have the resources to be competitive with a bigger school.
Well, I was going to say, so if you're not top 5, if you're not Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, these teams that just crank out pros left and right, who get discounts anyway. Mm-hmm. If you're not them and you're not a team at the bottom who's able to now do something, you're kind of stuck in that middle stratus like Tennessee.
Yep.
That's a whole new playing field, and it's a lot of questions.
Yeah, I think for the Tennessees, the Auburns, programs like that, the Floridas even. I mean, we saw Florida make a big run last year after they decided to keep Billy Napier. They went on a huge run, kind of devoting NIL resources to getting players instead of hiring new coaches. It worked for them. Now everyone's got about the same amount of money to spend under this current system, as long as it's in place, as long as the house settlement remains intact and not legally challenged and torn apart. But as long as this is the law of the land, it just gives everyone about the same amount of money to spend. And again, when you're a program like Tennessee that is one of the haves and not the have-nots in college football, that's not a good thing for you. I think it's going to come down to how creative can some of these schools be? How creative are they willing to be in terms of getting some of these endorsements that might get through this clearinghouse that's going to be responsible for overseeing things? Can you get some of those things to give you some additional resources to take advantage of your built-in advantages?
And that's where you might be better off if you're a school, for example, in Austin, Texas has money, but if you're a school in Austin, Texas, or Columbus, Ohio, big city, tons of industry there, all kinds of businesses there, you might be better off than, well, what do you got in Starkville?
Right.
Well, Sid's Sandwich Shop's going to give a kid $2 million. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So Knoxville, are you going to have that kind of money? And this is what I was going to ask you specifically. One of the things the clearinghouse has made it clear that's going away is you're going to have to actually now pay somebody for their name, image, likeness. It became the Wild West in part because Spire Sports in Tennessee were kind of, if they weren't first through the door, they were in the first group through the door.
Yeah.
And they said, we'll just create a club. You give money to the club. We give the money. They make appearances to the club or give you an autograph or something, and we'll just pay the kids.
Sure.
That isn't going to work anymore. The idea of we just collect money and funnel it to the players, that's out.
Yep.
So you've got to be creative, as you say, or you've got to be more detailed in finding and generating people who will do. You got to find if you're Memphis, you got Fred Smith and everybody goes to Fred Smith. If you're Oregon, everybody goes to Phil Knight. If you're here, I don't know where you go. Charlie Ergen, you're going to be doing a lot of people in Dish Network shirts, I guess.
Yeah.
A lot of photos. So what does this mean for Tennessee? The fact that you've been very big with your volunteer club.
Yeah.
Is this going to be a major change that you're going to have to shift to something else?
It is going to be a major change. I still think long term it remains to be seen because to me this is all a house of cards that could tumble really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
All it takes is one person to challenge this, and I don't think there's a lot of legal standing for this to hold up. So what player finally gets a deal shot down, and when it happens, how quickly can he get it overturned?
I'll be shocked if this is still in place by the first weekend of the year.
Yeah, and I don't think that's crazy to think. We're already seeing, there's already been a challenge in the works on the basis of Title IX.
Yeah.
There's going to be some basketball players who see this as threatening their cap, what they can make.
And you're going to have some athletes who are going to lose their sport altogether.
Yeah.
I mean, you're already seeing schools cut sports.
Absolutely.
So at some point, the Washington State track and field team, they just lost field. Now they're just track. They cut all the field sports. What if you get 5 or 6 of those field athletes to get together and say, hey, look, you just took away all of our opportunities, our academic opportunities, our financial opportunities that we could have made with a sponsor of some sort. I don't know. It doesn't have to be one. There's nothing that says it can't be 5, 10, 50 of these players coming together and suing somebody, which I think gives it more credence if they do that.
Yep, and at the end of the day, I know Will West has talked about this. It's essentially an illegal salary cap being instituted on these players, and all it takes is the right group or the right player making that case legally and getting that to succeed to tear this all down. But as long as this is in place, yes, it challenges everyone out there to see what they can come up with. And I think Tennessee has some pretty good resources, but to your point, how many of those like 6-figure deals that are really going to be viewed as legitimate by this clearinghouse can they come up with? Because that's the kind of thing you're talking about that would actually make an impact. A $30,000 deal here, $50,000 here, that's not going to make a huge difference. You need some big deals, and it's got to be in line with whatever this clearinghouse considers fair market value, or it's going to be shot down. And then you're talking about someone needing to challenge it legally to get that in place.
Yeah, it's again, if you're in a bigger city with bigger businesses based there, I mean, FedEx and Fred Smith in Memphis is bigger and better than anything you've got here right now.
Maybe you can still pull some strings with Pilot. You got some avenues there, but how many can you come up with, and how many times can you go back to the well for that kind of thing? Is that just something you're going to see for the Faison Brandons of the world, or is that something you can really pull out for a quarter of your roster and make a big difference?
All right, so short term, ranked 35th, you're saying don't panic.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. You talked about 5 stars. They're legitimately in the mix for 5-star LSU wide receiver Tristan Keys, the number 1 wide receiver in the country. They're right in the thick of it, battling Michigan for Savion Hyder, the number 1 running back in the country. Not saying they're going to get both of those guys, but if you get even one of them, changes your class completely. Tristan Givens, a 5-star edge rusher. It's kind of Tennessee, Texas A&M. He'll announce pretty soon. So some big battles that are still to be decided. If Tennessee just wins one or two of those, it's going to change the look of the class pretty quickly.
And long term, you are a little bit more worried for the Tennessees of the world than you are some other schools.
Long term, I think it does have.
If this system stays.
Yeah, if this system stays, is it the kind of thing that's going to cause Tennessee to have a 25th ranked recruiting class? I don't think it's going to do that, but I don't see how it's a positive for them that this system is in place. So it might impact their ability. We've talked about Tennessee needing to kind of keep putting guys in the NFL, keep winning to start climbing up and maybe have a top 7 or top 5 class in the next few years. This is going to impact your ability, I think, to move up the ranks with this system giving so many schools so many of the same resources you have to hand out.
Ryan Callahan, thank you very much for coming in. You can read his stuff at GoVols247.com. And if you like this kind of content, click the thumbs up. Ring the bell. That'll notify you when we put stuff up. Hit subscribe. That way it tells other Vol fans that we're here. That helps us a whole lot. And leave us a comment if there's any questions you have, if you disagree, if you agree, if you got thoughts on all this, let us know what they are. And we'll see you next time right back here on the Sports Source Digital Network.